The rain in the sector known as Rusty Spill never stopped falling from the perpetually gray skies. This wasn't ordinary precipitation, but rather a chemical mixture that carried the acrid taste of metal, ash, and industrial waste still seeping from the destroyed towers of the consortium. Elias Rohr moved through the ruins with the measured precision of a man who had learned to conserve every joule of energy in an environment that punished wastefulness with death. Once he had been a colonial surveyor, mapping unexplored worlds for an expansion that no longer existed after the collapse. Now his only mission was survival, and he performed it with a soldier's discipline in this wasteland of twisted metal and broken dreams. His shelter, an old geodesic station originally designed for atmospheric monitoring, had been meticulously fortified against both the relentless storms and the creeping despair that claimed so many survivors. Douglas Kane, Elias's only companion for the past 3 years, maintained their perimeter defenses with the same methodical dedication. Unlike Elias, whose background in surveying had given him an intimate knowledge of the terrain, Doug had been a security specialist for the consortium before everything fell apart. His expertise had proven invaluable in transforming their shelter into an impenetrable fortress against both the elements and the desperate scavengers that roam the wastes. The two men operated in comfortable silence most days, their routines polished by years of cohabitation and mutual respect. Doug's imposing physique and combat experience complemented Elias's analytical mind and navigational skills in a partnership that had kept them both alive when so many others had perished. That evening, while searching for salvageable parts for their malfunctioning water purification system, Elias heard a sound that stood out distinctly from the general cacophony of the chemical rain, a faint, arrhythmic tapping that echoed through the metallic debris. The unexpected noise made him pause, listening intently with the heightened senses of a survivor. This wasn't the wind whistling through abandoned structures or the settling of unstable rubble. The pattern was too irregular, too purposeful. This was something alive making deliberate contact with the surrounding environment. His hand instinctively rested on the crowbar secured to his belt, the weapon worn smooth from years of use against both mechanical obstacles and human threats. Behind a tilted column of an old transport hub that had once connected the sprawling industrial complex, he found the source of the mysterious sound. A small girl, appearing no older than 7 years of age, with skin the color of twilight lavender, that marked her as one of the indigenous species of this colony world. Her frail body showed clear signs of malnutrition and exposure to the elements. Her clothes ragged and discolored from the caustic rain. Her eyes, resembling polished obsidian with no discernible iris or pupil, looked up at him with a mixture of wariness and desperate hope. Between her trembling fingers, she clutched a small metal disc, which she had been tapping against the stone structure, creating the noise that had drawn him to this location. Elias approached with deliberate slowness, keeping his movements fluid and non-threatening, as he would when encountering a frightened animal. "My name is Elias," he said in a calm, measured voice that betrayed none of the surprise he felt at finding a child alone in this desolate place. "I have no intention of causing you any harm." He offered her his flask of purified water, a precious commodity in the Rusty Spill, where most surface water had been contaminated beyond safe consumption. The girl, who hesitantly identified herself as Kira, accepted the container and drank with the desperate thirst of someone who had gone too long without proper hydration. As she drank, Elias observed the small piece of fabric clutched in her other hand, noting the embroidered lines that formed distinct patterns across its surface. These weren't random decorative elements, but appeared to be deliberately arranged in sequences that resembled a code or coordinate system. The implications were immediately clear to his trained mind. This child hadn't simply wandered into the ruins by chance or been carelessly abandoned. Her presence here represented a deliberate placement, suggesting a larger plan at work. With growing concern about her condition and the approaching darkness, Elias carefully wrapped her in his weather-resistant jacket and lifted her small form, feeling the unsettling lightness of her body and the tremendous weight of responsibility that now rested upon his shoulders. Doug was conducting maintenance on their communications array when Elias returned to the station with their unexpected guest. His initial reaction was one of suspicion bordering on hostility, his years as a security specialist having instilled in him a profound distrust of anomalies and unexpected variables. "Have you completely lost your mind?" he demanded, his voice low but intense, as he pulled Elias aside while the girl huddled near their heating unit. "We barely have enough resources for ourselves, and now you've brought back a liability that could compromise everything we've built here." "She would have died out there," Elias responded with quiet certainty, meeting his partner's hard gaze without flinching. "Whatever circumstances brought her to that place, she's innocent of them. I couldn't leave her to the mercy of the elements, or worse, the scavenger gangs." Their conversation continued in hushed, tense exchanges until Doug finally acquiesced, though the disapproval remained evident in the rigid set of his shoulders and the constant vigilance with which he observed their new addition to the shelter. Over the following 3 days, Elias created a safe environment for Kira within the confines of their fortified station. He allocated precious food stores to restore her strength, fashioned a sleeping area from spare insulation materials, and began teaching her the fundamental rules of their carefully ordered existence. The girl demonstrated remarkable intelligence and adaptability, quickly absorbing their protocols for water conservation, security measures, and emergency procedures as though they were elements of an engaging educational game, rather than critical survival mechanisms. Doug maintained his distance initially, his interaction with the child limited to occasional suspicious glances and curt acknowledgments of her presence. By the third evening, something unexpected happened that would transform their fragile arrangement. As Elias was instructing Kira on the operation of their distillation system, Doug approached with uncharacteristic hesitation. In his hands, he held something that stunned Elias, a small, crudely made doll fashioned from scraps of wire and fabric salvaged from their repair materials. "Thought she might want something to, you know," Doug mumbled, the gruff security specialist suddenly awkward in this unfamiliar territory of compassion. Kira accepted the gift with solemn reverence, her obsidian eyes reflecting something that neither man had seen in years within the desolation of Rusty Spill: pure, uncomplicated joy. That night, as Kira slept clutching her new treasure, Doug confessed to Elias that he had once had a daughter of his own, lost during the early chaos of the collapse. This unexpected vulnerability from his normally stoic companion gave Elias a newfound understanding of the complex man he had survived alongside for years. Their shared guardianship of Kira was gradually fostering connections deeper than mere survival cooperation, awakening long-dormant emotional capacities in both men. The fragile piece of their new arrangement was shattered when, precisely on the third night after Kira's arrival, a distinctive sequence of knocks reverberated through their reinforced door. The pattern wasn't random or desperate, but deliberate and rhythmic. 3 short impacts followed by 1 extended one. Elias and Doug exchanged significant glances, immediately recognizing that this wasn't the chaotic approach of scavengers or the mindless battering of environmental debris. This was a calculated signal, the same code pattern that Elias had noted on the fabric Kira had been carrying when he found her. Doug immediately assumed a defensive position with their most effective weapon, a modified pneumatic spear gun of his own design, while Elias approached the entrance with cautious precision. Beyond the armored viewport stood 2 figures, their forms obscured by protective clothing, but clearly feminine in stature and movement. The taller of the pair, with stern features and the same distinctive obsidian eyes that marked Kira's heritage, identified herself as Kaylin. Her companion, slimmer and with an analytical gaze that seemed to catalog every detail of her surroundings, introduced herself as Lyra. They were searching, they claimed, for a lost child who matched Kira's description. After a tense negotiation conducted through the security barrier, Elias permitted their entry while Doug maintained a vigilant guard position. The moment Kaylin crossed the threshold, the atmosphere within the station transformed dramatically. Kira emerged from her sleeping area and rushed to the woman, who embraced her with a combination of genuine relief and something more controlled, an almost clinical assessment of the child's condition. Throughout this reunion, Kaylin's obsidian eyes never ceased their methodical evaluation of the shelter's defenses, supply organization, and the 2 men themselves. Lyra, meanwhile, moved with careful precision around the perimeter of the main chamber, her attention seemingly fixed on innocuous details that nevertheless revealed much about their operations and capabilities. "We are deeply grateful for your protection of Kira," Kaylin stated with formal precision that didn't quite match the emotional scenario of finding a lost child. Many others would have exploited her vulnerability or simply ignored her plight altogether. The subtle emphasis on others carried implications that raised Doug's suspicions immediately, his fingers tightening almost imperceptibly on his weapon as he exchanged a loaded glance with Elias. As the initial tension of the encounter gradually subsided, Elias offered the women basic hospitality, purified water, and a portion of their protein rations. The conversation that followed was superficially about their supposed journey through the dangerous territories surrounding the Rusty Spill, but beneath the narrative lay currents of unasked questions and deliberate omissions. When Lyra inquired about the possibility of remaining at the station until Kira had fully recovered her strength, Doug's immediate rejection was overruled by Elias's more measured acceptance, though with clearly defined conditions and boundaries. The subsequent days unfolded with increasing complexity as Kaylin and Lyra integrated themselves into the established routines of the station with surprising adaptability. Too much adaptability, as Doug pointedly observed during a private moment with Elias, while the women were occupied with Kira's care. "These aren't desperate refugees," he whispered harshly, his security training highlighting the discrepancies that had been accumulating. "Their hands have calluses in the wrong places, not from scavenging or manual labor, but from weapons handling. They move in coordinated patterns when they think we aren't watching, covering sight lines and maintaining tactical positioning." Elias had noticed similar incongruities that troubled his analytical mind. Despite their claimed exhaustion from traveling, both women demonstrated physical conditioning inconsistent with the malnourishment common among genuine wasteland wanderers. Their questions, seemingly casual, consistently probed for information about the surrounding territories, defensive capabilities, and resource management that would be of limited value to simple survivors, but invaluable to someone with more strategic objectives. The situation escalated when Elias discovered Lyra examining their communication terminal with unexpected technical proficiency, her fingers hovering over the interface with the practiced familiarity of someone with advanced technological training. When confronted, she withdrew with an explanation of innocent curiosity that failed to account for her evident expertise. Later that same day, Kaylin engaged Doug in conversation about his security background, skillfully extracting information about his methodologies, while offering little substantive information about her own history, despite his pointed reciprocal questioning. Tension continued building until it culminated during an evening meal several days after the women's arrival. As they sat around the heating unit, consuming their carefully rationed provisions, Kaylin made what appeared to be a casual observation. "We were fortunate to avoid the eastern approach to this sector. According to rumors among other travelers, the gang known as the Rusty Dogs conducts nightly patrols along that route, targeting anyone vulnerable enough to overpower." Doug and Elias maintained neutral expressions, but a significant glance passed between them at this apparent probe for information. Without looking up from the maintenance he was performing on his spear gun, Doug responded with deliberate casualness. "That intelligence is significantly outdated. The Rusty Dogs haven't operated in the eastern quadrant since the structural collapse of the commercial district approximately 18 months ago. The lack of salvageable resources rendered the area worthless to their operations. Their current territory centers around the abandoned storage facilities in the northern sector, where they can intercept supply convoys attempting to circumvent the main transit routes." A heavy silence descended upon the room following this exchange. The calculated revelation of detailed territorial knowledge beyond what simple survivors should possess had not been accidental. Doug's military background and Elias's strategic mind had coordinated this counterintelligence move perfectly. Kaylin's eyes met Lyra's in a moment of silent communication that confirmed what the men had suspected. The women weren't merely refugees seeking safety. Their presence represented something more deliberate, and Kira's rescue had been part of a larger operation whose purpose remained unclear. The following morning, clearly recognizing that the pretense was wearing dangerously thin, Lyra approached Elias as he conducted routine maintenance on the external sensor array. "I believe we owe you greater transparency regarding our circumstances," she began, her voice pitched low enough that Doug, who was conducting perimeter checks nearby, wouldn't overhear. "Our situation is more complex than we initially represented. We aren't simply displaced individuals seeking shelter. We are connected to a larger community known as the Ark, an organized collective of survivors attempting to establish communication networks and identify secure locations capable of supporting sustainable populations." She explained, with carefully measured details, that their group had been conducting reconnaissance throughout the region when they became separated during a confrontation with hostile forces. Kira had been lost during this engagement, and locating her had become their primary objective before continuing their assessment mission. This account explains certain aspects of their behavior and skills, but Elias perceived the calculated nature of the disclosure, revealing enough truth to establish credibility while still withholding critical information. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by the piercing alarm from one of the motion detection sensors positioned along the station's vulnerable southeastern approach. The security monitor displayed an approaching entity that immediately triggered both men's combat reflexes, not human or indigenous fauna, but a metallic, multi-limbed drone with the distinctive configuration of a consortium maintenance unit. These autonomous machines, originally designed for infrastructure repair, had been reprogrammed during the final days of the collapse to identify and neutralize unauthorized human settlements in restricted areas. Their advanced sensors could detect energy signatures, heat patterns, and resource concentrations that indicated human habitation. "It's conducting an active scan for power sources," Kaylin stated with immediate command authority, her previous facade of civilian vulnerability completely abandoned as she transformed into what was clearly her natural role as a tactical leader. "If it identifies our position and broadcasts a confirmation signal, additional units will converge on this location within hours." The abrupt shift in her demeanor confirmed everything Doug had suspected, but the immediate threat superseded any confrontation about deceptions. Working with the coordinated efficiency of trained operators, the four adults implemented a hastily devised defensive strategy. Elias identified a structural weakness in the station's eastern wall where they could create an ambush position without compromising their overall security. Doug retrieved specialized electromagnetic disruptors he had salvaged from abandoned security outposts, devices specifically designed to interfere with drone operating systems. Kaylin deployed to a flanking position with remarkable tactical awareness, while Lyra demonstrated unexpected technical prowess by accessing the station's monitoring systems to create a false heat signature that would draw the drone away from their actual position. Their combined expertise resulted in the successful neutralization of the mechanical threat, the disabled drone now lying in pieces around their defensive position. As they regrouped inside the station, breathing heavily from the exertion and lingering adrenaline, a new atmosphere developed between them, reluctant professional respect replacing the previous tension of suspicion. They had functioned not as desperate survivors thrown together by circumstance, but as a cohesive unit with complementary skills and instinctive coordination that spoke to advanced training and experience. The momentary cooperation, however, gave way to confrontation once the immediate danger had passed. Doug positioned himself strategically between the women and the station's exit, his weapon held with casual expertise that nevertheless communicated clear intent. "No more partial truths or convenient explanations," he demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "You're military reconnaissance, not refugees or community scouts. Your operational discipline and tactical responses aren't skills acquired in survivor camps. What's your actual mission, and what role did that child play in it?" The directness of the question created a palpable shift in the room's atmosphere. After a measured silence, Kaylin straightened her posture and met Doug's challenging gaze with equal intensity. "You're correct in your assessment of our capabilities, though not entirely accurate regarding our affiliation," she acknowledged, her tone now reflecting the precision of a professional report rather than a civilian conversation. "We represent a specialized evaluation unit of the ARC, tasked with identifying not just locations, but individuals with the potential to strengthen our collective." With clinical detachment that struck Elias as more disturbing than any threat, she explained the methodology that had brought Kira to their doorstep. The child was not lost or separated during conflict. Her placement was deliberate, a controlled variable in the established assessment protocol. She detailed how their organization had developed a system for evaluating potential recruits or allies through their responses to vulnerable individuals in need. "We place her in carefully selected locations, visible enough to be discovered, but secure enough that immediate danger is minimal. We then observe the reactions of those who encounter her." The implications of this admission struck Doug with particular force, his expression hardening into barely contained fury as Kaylin continued. "Those who ignore her, exploit her vulnerability, or respond with cruelty are identified as threats to be neutralized or avoided. Those who offer assistance, despite the burden it represents, demonstrate qualities essential to rebuilding functional communities. Compassion tempered with pragmatism, protective instincts balanced with strategic thinking. Her obsidian eyes shifted between the two men. Your response exceeded our baseline parameters for positive assessment. The care you provided, the education you began, and most significantly, your ability to maintain security protocols while accommodating her needs marked you as high-value candidates for recruitment. Elias felt physically ill at this clinical deconstruction of what he had considered a basic humanitarian response to a child in danger. You deliberately placed a child, a vulnerable, dependent being, in a hazardous environment as a test, he questioned, the disgust evident in his voice. You risked her safety, her very life, to evaluate the moral character of strangers? The risk was calculated and controlled, Lyra interjected, her tone suggesting this objection was both anticipated and frequently encountered. Kira was never beyond our observation perimeter. Had you represented a threat, intervention would have been immediate. Doug's reaction was more visceral, his military restraint momentarily abandoned as he slammed his palm against the metal surface of the communications console. You used a child as bait, he growled, years of suppressed rage finding focus in this revelation. Whatever justification you've constructed, whatever greater good you claim to serve, you weaponized innocence and exploited the basic decency of others for your own purposes. The confrontation escalated into a bitter exchange, with Kalen defending their methodology as a necessary adaptation to a world where conventional ethical frameworks had become luxury that increased mortality rates. Doug's counter-arguments grew increasingly personal, revealing fragments of his history. A daughter lost during the early violence of the collapse, his subsequent dedication to protecting the vulnerable even when it compromised tactical advantage. Their philosophical dispute continued until Elias intervened, recognizing that the fracturing alliance could jeopardize everyone's safety in their precarious environment. The following day brought a profound shift in the station's atmosphere. The common areas that had gradually developed a tentative, communal feeling now radiated Arctic coldness despite the functional heating systems. Doug had retreated into hypervigilance, maintaining constant awareness of the women's positions and restricting access to critical systems with additional security measures. Elias continued performing essential maintenance tasks with mechanical precision, but the tentative mentorship he had established with Kira had been withdrawn, replaced by formal, distant interaction that protected his wounded ethical sensibilities. The child herself seemed to diminish in this environment of fractured trust, her previously emerging confidence receding into watchful silence as she observed the adults navigate their complex hostilities. She remained physically close to Kalen and Lyra, but her obsidian eyes frequently sought out Elias and Doug, with an expression that reflected confusion and loss rather than the calculated assessment her guardians had revealed. When the tension had stretched nearly to breaking point, it was Kira who initiated the transformation. While Doug conducted inventory of their ammunition stores, a task he had been performing with excessive frequency since the revelations, the child approached him with determined purpose. Her small hand reached out to touch his weathered one, the contact causing him to freeze in surprise at this breach of the emotional distance that had developed. It was my assigned responsibility, she stated with unexpected clarity and maturity in her childish voice. Everyone in our community contributes according to their capabilities. Lyra performed this function before me when she was younger. It is my contribution to our collective survival. Her obsidian eyes held his with unwavering directness. I understand the purpose and accept the risks. I am not afraid to fulfill my duty. Doug stared at the child, momentarily speechless at this declaration that complicated his moral outrage. This wasn't the traumatized victim of adult manipulation he had imagined, but a conscious participant in a system that, however disturbing to his ethical framework, represented adaptation rather than exploitation. The revelation struck at the foundation of his protective anger, forcing reconsideration of assumptions about agency and choice in their transformed world. Later that evening, while conducting external maintenance that provided a rare moment of privacy, Doug confronted Lyra about Kira's surprising statement. Is it true, he demanded, his voice rough with conflicted emotions. You were used in the same way, placed as bait to test strangers' reactions? Lyra's expression remained carefully neutral as she confirmed Kira's account. I was identified as having optimal characteristics for the assessment role when I was approximately her age. Small enough to appear vulnerable, intelligent enough to evaluate situations accurately, resilient enough to adapt to different environments. Something flickered across her features, a shadow of remembered experiences. The methodology evolved from necessity during the early years after the collapse, when our original community was infiltrated by individuals who presented as allies but proved destructive once within our defenses. She described the devastating consequences of misplaced trust: resources depleted, security compromised, lives lost. After the third such incident, our leadership recognized that conventional interview processes or probationary periods were insufficient screening mechanisms. More effective evaluation methods became necessary for community survival. Her gaze challenged him directly. Would you rather we had continued accepting newcomers based on sympathetic narratives and apparent goodwill, knowing the potential cost of misjudgment? The question lingered between them, unanswerable within the ethical frameworks of the vanished world, but unavoidable in their current reality. Doug returned to the station that night with his certainty shaken, his moral outrage complicated by pragmatic understanding of their desperate circumstances. When he shared the conversation with Elias during their security rotation, his partner's analytical mind approached the ethical dilemma from multiple perspectives, neither condemning nor accepting, but evaluating the complex calculus of survival ethics in their transformed environment. The following days brought gradual, hesitant reconnection as the station's inhabitants navigated their new understanding of each other. The women remained vigilant, but demonstrated increased transparency about their community and objectives. Doug and Elias maintained healthy skepticism, but recognized the potential value in alliance with a larger organized group. Kira, sensing the shifting dynamics, began cautiously rebuilding her connections with the two men, her natural intelligence and resilience acting as a bridge between the fractured parties. On the seventh evening after the women's arrival, Elias made a decision that would transform all their trajectories. Without explanation, he retrieved a secure container from a concealed compartment beneath his sleeping area, a location unknown even to Doug, despite their years of cohabitation. The reinforced case opened with a complex sequence of mechanical operations, revealing contents that elicited shocked recognition from everyone present. Spread carefully on their communal table was a comprehensive topographical survey of the entire region. Detailed, annotated maps created during Elias's tenure as a consortium surveyor, but never submitted to central archives before the collapse. These weren't the incomplete, degraded charts circulated among survivor groups, but pristine originals showing resource locations, structural integrity assessments, and environmental hazard zones across thousands of square kilometers. Your evaluation of us is complete, Elias stated quietly, his voice carrying unexpected authority in the hushed room. Now I will evaluate you and your organization's worthiness of this information. His finger indicated a specific location nestled within a complex geological formation, a deep canyon system with multiple natural defensive positions. Geothermal substation Echo 7, designed for complete operational autonomy, connected to underground aquifers unaffected by surface contamination, protected by terrain features that make conventional assault nearly impossible. The revelation electrified the room. Such a facility represented not merely shelter but the foundation for genuine rebuilding. Sustainable power generation, clean water access, defensible position, and sufficient internal space for community development. The station Elias and Doug had maintained was a survival bunker. This hidden installation could become a civilization's cornerstone. Kaylin's obsidian eyes widened in genuine surprise. Perhaps the first unguarded reaction she had displayed since her arrival. The consortium records listed Echo 7 as decommissioned and stripped of resources before the collapse. She stated, her professional composure momentarily abandoned. All reconnaissance based on official documentation indicated the site was non-viable. Officially, yes, Elias confirmed with the faintest suggestion of satisfaction at having unsettled her carefully maintained control. The facility was designated for decommissioning due to its isolation, making resource extraction inefficient for corporate purposes. The paperwork was processed and transmitted to central records. The actual decommissioning team, however, was redirected to higher priority sites when the initial signs of the collapse began manifesting. Echo 7 remains intact, powered down but structurally complete. The implications spread through the room like electrical current. Lyra approached the maps with scientific precision, analyzing the coordinates and surrounding terrain with growing excitement. This changes everything about our strategic positioning in this region. She breathed, her fingers tracing potential security perimeters and expansion zones. This isn't just another temporary refuge. It's a genuine foundation point. Kaylin's reaction was more measured, her tactical mind already calculating the logistics and security implications of this revelation. Why share this now? She questioned, her gaze fixed on Elias with renewed assessment. This information represents extraordinary power in our current environment. What do you want in exchange? Not an exchange, Doug interjected, moving to stand shoulder to shoulder with his longtime partner in a show of unified purpose. A condition. We'll provide complete access to these maps and Elias's knowledge of the facility's systems, but only if we personally oversee the initial occupation and security establishment. No proxies, no reporting back to your leadership for further instructions. We assess the site condition, implement the activation protocols, and establish the defensive perimeter according to our expertise. The demand was significant, essentially requiring Kaylin to deviate from her organizational protocols and operate on independent authority. The women conferred privately, their discussion intense but conducted with the discipline to keep their voices below audible thresholds. When they returned, Kaylin extended her hand not as a scout or evaluator, but as an equal partner in a joint operation. Agreed, she stated simply. We establish Echo 7 as a cooperative initiative with joint authority during the critical phases. Her obsidian eyes reflected something beyond tactical calculation, a recognition of the transformative potential this alliance represented. Welcome to the Ark, not as recruits, but as founders of its newest branch. The following days were consumed with intensive planning. Elias extracted every detail of Echo 7 systems from his remarkable memory, creating operational manuals and activation sequences. Doug designed security protocols that integrated his military experience with the specialized knowledge Kaylin contributed about regional threats. Lyra's technical expertise complemented Elias's systemic understanding, their combined knowledge resolving potential complications before they could manifest. Throughout this process, Kira observed and contributed in her own way, her perspective sometimes identifying oversights that the adults' specialized focus had missed. 2 weeks after the women's arrival, they were prepared for the expedition to Echo 7. Their supplies were packed with military precision, routes carefully planned to avoid known hazard zones, and contingency protocols established for various emergency scenarios. The night before their departure, as the others completed final preparations, Doug conducted one last perimeter check, a ritual that had preserved their lives countless times over the years. At the furthest extension of their sensor network, he detected an anomalous reading that triggered immediate concern. The pattern suggested not environmental interference, but deliberate signal disruption, the kind employed by organized scavenger groups before a coordinated assault. Returning to the station at accelerated pace, he confirmed his suspicions through secondary systems. A substantial force was converging on their location from multiple vectors, using approach strategies that indicated professional training rather than opportunistic scavenging. We've been compromised, he announced grimly, activating their emergency protocols with practiced efficiency. Multiple hostiles, coordinated movement, using counter-detection methods. This isn't a random raid. They know exactly what they're targeting. His gaze fixed on Kaylin with renewed suspicion. Did your Ark decide we weren't trustworthy partners after all? Is this a retrieval operation for you and the information we provided? Kaylin's reaction dispelled his accusation immediately. Genuine alarm transformed her features as she accessed their sensor feeds, her analysis confirming Doug's assessment with additional concerning details. These aren't our people, she stated with absolute certainty. The movement pattern is wrong. Our teams use staggered advancement with specific timing intervals. This is continuous convergence. Her expression darkened with recognition. This is consortium security methodology, preserved post-collapse. We've encountered similar tactics from a group calling themselves Preservers, former corporate enforcement units that maintain organizational cohesion after the breakdown. The implications were immediately clear to everyone present. Unlike typical scavengers seeking portable resources, these attackers represented an organized force with the training and equipment to overcome even their substantial defenses. More concerning still was their likely objective. Not simple theft, but acquisition of the intelligence Elias possessed about functional infrastructure. Information that, in the wrong hands, could transform regional power dynamics catastrophically. We need to execute immediate evacuation, Doug stated, his tone leaving no room for debate as he initiated their long-established contingency plans. Minimal essential equipment, emergency supplies only. We maintain communication silence until we reach secondary rally point Alpha. His eyes met Elias's in a moment of unspoken communication developed through years of partnership. They had prepared for this scenario, knowing their sanctuary would eventually be compromised. What they hadn't anticipated was having 3 additional people to incorporate into their extraction plan. As they rapidly gathered critical supplies and disabled systems that could be exploited by their pursuers, Kalen approached with tactical urgency. They'll have the primary evacuation routes covered, she stated, reviewing the limited options on Elias's terrain maps. Standard consortium procedure establishes containment perimeter before initiating approach. We need an alternative exfiltration vector. Elias indicated a maintenance tunnel network that had once connected the various industrial facilities of the sector. Most sections have collapsed or flooded, which is why they won't be prioritized in their containment strategy. There's a functional passage here, his finger traced a narrow path through the underground labyrinth, that emerges beyond their likely perimeter if their operational protocols remain consistent with pre-collapse standards. The plan required perfect execution under extreme pressure. Doug would lead with Kira, navigating the hazardous tunnel system while maintaining operational security. Elias would follow with critical documentation and navigational equipment essential for locating Echo 7. Kalen and Lyra would form the rear guard, employing their specialized training to deploy countermeasures that would delay pursuit without revealing their escape route. As they prepared for departure, Lyra made a critical discovery while conducting final sensor checks. They've deployed signal interceptors at standard frequencies, she reported with professional concern. Any communication between separated units will be detected and triangulated. This complicated their strategy significantly. Once divided, they would have no secure method of coordination until reaching their predetermined rendezvous point. The situation deteriorated further when proximity alarms indicated the perimeter had been breached sooner than anticipated. Their attackers had accelerated their timetable, suggesting either urgency or confidence in superior capabilities. The revised assessment reduced their evacuation window from 30 minutes to less than 15, barely enough time to implement even their streamlined emergency protocols. Doug made an immediate command decision, his military background asserting itself in the crisis. Change of plans. We split now. Multiple vectors. Maximum confusion. Primary objective is reaching Echo 7 with the essential intelligence intact. He turned to Elias, his expression conveying everything their years together had built. You take the primary documentation and Kira through the emergency shaft to the Eastern Service Tunnel. It's the most direct route to the rendezvous point. The rest of us will create diversionary operations to fragment their pursuit units. Elias immediately recognized the implications of this strategy. That leaves you exposed as primary targets with minimal chance of successful evasion, he objected, his analytical mind calculating the probability matrices. The statistical likelihood of all 3 diversionary units reaching the rendezvous is approximately 7% under optimal conditions. Current scenario parameters reduce that to less than 3%, which is precisely why you need to be the one carrying the critical intelligence, Doug countered with calm finality, already distributing specialized equipment for the diversionary operations. Your navigational expertise and familiarity with Echo 7 systems make you irreplaceable for the primary mission objective. The rest of us are tactically expendable if the core intelligence reaches the destination. The harsh pragmatism of this assessment silenced further objections. They all recognized the strategic validity, however emotionally unacceptable. In the final moments before their separation, Doug knelt before Kira, his weathered hands gently gripping her shoulders. Stay close to Elias and follow his instructions exactly, he told her with unexpected tenderness. He'll get you safely to our new home. Remember everything we taught you about moving silently and recognizing danger signs. The child's obsidian eyes reflected understanding beyond her years as she nodded solemnly. When she spoke, her voice carried the discipline they had instilled in her. I will maintain operational security and assist with navigation through confined spaces, she promised, demonstrating how thoroughly she had absorbed their teachings. Conserve resources, minimize exposure, verify safety before advancing. Doug's expression softened momentarily as he pressed something into her small hand. The crude doll he had fashioned days earlier, now modified with additional reinforcement. Keep this close. It's more than it appears. The cryptic statement was accompanied by a significant glance toward Elias that suggested hidden functionality within the seemingly simple object. Their final preparations were conducted in disciplined silence, each focused on their specific responsibilities. As they prepared to move toward their designated exit points, Doug approached Elias one last time. The two men who had survived years together in the hostile environment exchanged no words. Their communication transcended verbal expression after so much shared experience. A brief clasp of forearms conveyed everything: respect, trust, and the acknowledgement that this might be their final interaction. The diversionary teams departed first, creating carefully orchestrated disturbances at calculated intervals around the perimeter to disperse the attackers' attention. Elias watched the tactical display as Doug's signal moved purposefully toward the most dangerous sector, drawing the largest concentration of hostiles away from the others with deliberate visibility. The selfless strategy was characteristic of the man who had become far more than a survival partner over their years together. When the designated moment arrived, Elias secured Kira in the specialized harness they had prepared and entered the narrow emergency shaft that would begin their escape route. As the access panel sealed behind them, muffling the distant sounds of engagement, he felt the weight of responsibility for both their lives and the future that their mission represented. The knowledge he carried, both in documentation and in his surveyor's memory, could transform mere survival into genuine rebuilding if they reached Echo 7 successfully. Their journey through the maintenance tunnels was arduous and hazardous. Sections that appeared stable on their dated schematics had deteriorated significantly, requiring careful navigation and occasional improvised repairs to proceed. Kira proved invaluable in these circumstances, her small size allowing her to access narrow passages for reconnaissance or to manipulate mechanisms beyond Elias's reach. Her discipline remained impressive throughout the ordeal, maintaining noise discipline and resource conservation without prompting. At each junction, Elias consulted both the physical maps and his mental navigation system, calculating optimal routes while accounting for pursuit probabilities. The lack of communication with the other teams created profound uncertainty about their status, but the absence of pursuit suggested their diversionary strategy was at least partially successful. This provided small comfort against the statistical probabilities Doug had tacitly acknowledged before their separation. After 14 hours of continuous movement, they reached a critical waypoint, an abandoned monitoring substation that served as their first equipment cache and temporary shelter. As Elias secured the perimeter and established basic life support, Kira retrieved the crude doll Doug had given her. With careful movements that suggested prior instruction, she manipulated a hidden mechanism within its construction. The doll's chest cavity opened to reveal a miniaturized data storage device and a compact communication unit unlike any standard equipment they had used at the station. Doug showed me how to activate this when we are safe, she explained, executing a precise sequence of inputs that brought the device to life. He said it contains contingency protocols and secure communication channels that bypass standard frequency monitoring. The device's activation revealed Doug's additional precautions: a secondary communication network using obsolete frequencies, no longer monitored by modern scanning equipment. The system connected to automated relay points he had apparently established during his solitary patrols over the years, creating a secure information network invisible to conventional detection methods. This foresight, unknown even to Elias despite their years together, demonstrated the true depth of Doug's strategic thinking and commitment to their survival. Through this unexpected channel, fragmentary updates reached them over the following days as they continued their journey toward Echo 7. Kalen had successfully evaded initial pursuit and was proceeding along a secondary route toward the rendezvous point. Lyra had encountered complications but remained operational, her progress delayed but continuing. Doug's status remained uncertain. His final transmission indicated successful engagement with multiple pursuit units, drawing them far from the others' escape vectors, but no further communication had been received from his location. The 9th day of their journey brought them within visual range of Echo 7's external features, a modest surface installation disguising the extensive facility beneath. From their elevated observation position, Elias conducted detailed surveillance before approaching, verifying that no hostile forces had preceded them to this critical location. The facility appeared undisturbed, its external condition matching his detailed memories from years before. As they prepared for final approach, movement in the valley below caught their attention. A solitary figure emerged from the concealment of a rock formation, moving with familiar precision despite evident injury. Kaylin had reached the rendezvous point ahead of schedule, though her condition suggested significant challenges during her journey. Through the secure communication channel, they coordinated their convergence at the facility's maintenance entrance, a secondary access point unlikely to be included in standard facility documentation. Their reunion was brief and focused on operational necessities rather than emotional responses. Kaylin's normally immaculate appearance showed clear evidence of multiple engagements. Improvised bandages covering injuries sustained during her evasion efforts. She reported confirmed sightings of pursuit teams still operating in the region, suggesting the attackers had committed substantial resources to their operation despite the diversionary tactics. "Any communication from the others?" she asked, her professional demeanor momentarily slipping to reveal genuine concern for her longtime partner and their new ally. Elias shared the limited information from their secure channel, including the continued absence of updates from Doug's position. The implications remained unspoken, but understood by all three survivors. With the facility entrance secured, Elias began the complex process of reactivating Echo 7's dormant systems. His surveyor's knowledge proved invaluable as they navigated the initialization procedures, bringing power systems online at minimal levels to avoid detection while establishing basic life support throughout the primary chambers. The facility's condition exceeded even his optimistic projections. The automated maintenance systems had continued functioning at reduced capacity during the years of abandonment, preserving critical infrastructure from significant deterioration. Their cautious exploration revealed Echo 7's true potential as a foundation for rebuilding. The geothermal power systems required minimal rehabilitation to reach operational capacity. Water purification systems connected to uncontaminated aquifers needed only component replacement rather than complete reconstruction. Agricultural chambers, designed for supplementary food production, could be expanded to support a substantial community with proper management. The defensive advantages of the location were enhanced by integrated security systems that could be restored with targeted repairs. On the 12th day after their evacuation, as they completed preliminary facility assessment, the secure communication channel activated with an unexpected transmission. Lyra had reached the outer perimeter of Echo 7's territory, but her situation was precarious. She reported multiple pursuit units converging on her position, having somehow traced her movement pattern despite their countermeasures. More concerning was her additional intelligence. The attacking force had deployed specialized tracking technology focused on identifying the unique radiation signature of Elias's survey documentation, technology that could potentially locate them even within Echo 7's shielded environment. The transmission ended abruptly with sounds of engagement, leaving them uncertain of Lyra's status, but acutely aware of the approaching threat. Kaylin immediately transitioned to defensive operations, her injury seemingly forgotten as she secured potential access points and established preliminary defensive positions. Elias focused on accelerating the activation of Echo 7's integrated security systems, prioritizing the radiation shielding that would conceal their presence from the specialized tracking equipment. As they worked against accelerating timelines, Kira approached Elias with unusual urgency. "Something's happening with Doug's device," she reported, indicating the communication unit that had remained silent regarding its provider status. The display showed an automated protocol activation, emergency contingency measures Doug had apparently programmed to execute under specific conditions. The incoming data stream revealed a comprehensive tactical assessment of the pursuing forces, including their composition, equipment capabilities, and command structure. Most critically, the intelligence identified a vulnerability in their operational methodology. The specialized tracking units required periodic synchronization with a central command vehicle to maintain targeting accuracy. This technological dependency created a potential point of failure that could be exploited with properly timed countermeasures. The tactical package included detailed instructions for creating an isolation field that would disrupt this synchronization, rendering the tracking technology temporarily ineffective. The source of this crucial intelligence was clear to everyone, though none spoke it aloud. Doug had allowed himself to be captured, using the opportunity to gather critical information about their adversaries from within. The transmission method suggested he had successfully planted the communication device within the enemy's operational perimeter, sacrificing his freedom, and likely his life, to provide them this advantage. The automated nature of the transmission confirmed he expected no opportunity to deliver the intelligence personally. Implementation of Doug's final strategy required perfect coordination between their limited resources. Alias would complete Echo 7's shielding activation while simultaneously preparing the isolation field generator using components salvaged from the facility's original communication array. Kalen would establish a defensive perimeter that could withstand initial assault long enough for the technical countermeasures to become effective. Kira, despite Elias's concerns for her safety, insisted on fulfilling a critical role, delivering the isolation field device to the optimal deployment position outside the facility's main shielding. "I am smaller and faster, with better concealment capabilities in restricted terrain," she argued with the tactical assessment methodology they had taught her. "The statistical probability of successful deployment increases by 63% with my execution rather than either of yours." Her obsidian eyes held the same determined responsibility she had demonstrated throughout their ordeal. "This is my contribution to our survival, just as Doug made his." The invocation of Doug's sacrifice silenced further objections. They prepared the operation with grim efficiency, each understanding the limited probability of complete success, but committed to maximizing their survival chances through perfect execution of their roles. The isolation field device, disguised within the crude doll that had become Kira's constant companion, was programmed with the specific frequency disruption patterns identified in Doug's intelligence. As their preparations reached completion, perimeter sensors detected Lyra's approach, wounded but mobile, having temporarily evaded her pursuers through superior knowledge of the terrain. Her arrival provided crucial updates on enemy positions and confirmation of their tactical vulnerabilities. More significantly, she brought direct intelligence regarding Doug's status. He had been captured alive but subjected to intensive interrogation methods, his continued resistance providing the time they needed to implement his final strategy. The operation commenced at calculated intervals, with Kira departing through a concealed maintenance shaft that would position her near the optimal deployment zone without exposing her to primary enemy surveillance. Elias completed the shielding activation sequence, while Kalen and Lyra established overlapping fields of fire covering all viable approach vectors to the facility. The coordination reflected their evolved partnership, no longer divided by suspicion, but unified by shared purpose and the common bond of Doug's sacrifice. From their monitoring position within Echo 7's command center, they tracked Kira's progress through the concealed terrain. Her movements demonstrated all the discipline and tactical awareness they had instilled in her, utilizing natural cover and maintaining noise discipline that would have made Doug proud. When she reached the designated deployment position, a natural formation that provided both concealment and the elevation necessary for optimal signal propagation, she activated the device with practiced precision. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The enemy forces' coordinated movement patterns disintegrated into confusion as their tracking systems delivered contradictory information. Communication discipline collapsed as unit commanders attempted to compensate for the sudden technological failure. The central command vehicle, now identified by its distinctive electronic emissions as it attempted to reestablish synchronization, became vulnerable to precision targeting. Kalen utilized this advantage with ruthless efficiency, deploying a modified drone from Echo 7's maintenance systems to deliver a concentrated electromagnetic pulse to the command vehicle's position. The resulting cascade failure disabled their advanced technology, reducing the threat force to conventional capabilities that could be managed through Echo 7's defensive systems. Without their specialized tracking and coordination advantages, the attackers began a disorganized withdrawal rather than risk further engagement against unknown defensive capabilities. As they monitored the enemy's retreat, a new transmission appeared on their secure channel, weak but unmistakable. Doug had exploited the confusion of the technological failure to escape his captors, though his condition was clearly critical based on the transmission quality and content. His location placed him within theoretical reach of extraction, but in territory still populated by retreating enemy forces. The decision facing them was agonizing. Attempt a high-risk rescue operation that could compromise Echo 7's security, or prioritize the facility's protection and abandon the man whose sacrifice had ensured their survival. The debate was brief but intense, with Elias advocating for immediate extraction, while Kalen emphasized the strategic vulnerability such an operation would create. The impasse was broken by Kira's return through the maintenance shaft, her mission successfully completed, but bringing unexpected additional intelligence. During her deployment operation, she had identified a terrain feature not recorded on their maps, a concealed approach vector that could allow a small team to reach Doug's position while minimizing detection probability. "He would come for any of us," the child stated with simple certainty that transcended tactical calculations. "That is what makes us different from them. That is what makes us worth saving." The rescue operation was planned with desperate precision. A small team consisting of Elias and Lyra would utilize the concealed approach vector, while Kalen maintained Echo 7's defenses with Kira's assistance. The probability of success was objectively minimal, but the alternative was unconscionable to people who had been transformed by their shared ordeal and Doug's example of selfless sacrifice. Their advance through enemy-controlled territory was a masterpiece of tactical movement, utilizing every technique they had developed during their survival in the hostile environment. Elias's intimate knowledge of the terrain complemented Lyra's specialized infiltration training, allowing them to avoid detection by the disorganized but still dangerous remnants of the attacking force. When they reached the coordinates of Doug's last transmission, however, they found only abandoned equipment and signs of a struggle rather than their comrade. The evidence suggested he had been recaptured during his escape attempt, his weakened condition preventing successful evasion despite his extraordinary capabilities. Tactical assessment indicated the remaining enemy forces were consolidating at a fallback position several kilometers distant, likely preparing for extraction with their high-value prisoner rather than risking further engagement. Standard operational protocols would have dictated immediate withdrawal to preserve the security of their primary objective. The Doug they had known would have endorsed this decision without hesitation, prioritizing the many over the individual with his characteristic strategic clarity. Yet both Elias and Lyra found themselves incapable of this logical choice, their evaluation metrics fundamentally altered by the bonds formed through shared struggle and sacrifice. Their revised plan represented a near-suicidal level of risk, direct infiltration of the enemy consolidation point to locate and extract Doug before their withdrawal transportation arrived. Success would require perfect execution, exceptional luck, and capabilities beyond their realistic assessment. Failure would likely result in the loss of all three lives rather than just one. By any objective standard, it was an indefensible strategic decision. As they established observation positions overlooking the enemy's temporary camp, they identified Doug being transferred between secure vehicles, alive but clearly subjected to extreme physical stress during interrogation. His condition would make self-assisted extraction impossible, increasing the complexity of an already desperate operation. The enemy force, while reduced, still outnumbered them significantly and maintained equipment advantages that would be difficult to overcome. Their infiltration began during the transitional period between daylight and darkness, exploiting the temporary visual limitations experienced during adaptation to changing light conditions. Utilizing diversionary tactics adapted from Kalen's training, they created multiple distraction points to fragment the enemy's attention before approaching the vehicle containing their captured comrade. The initial phases proceeded with unexpected success, suggesting their desperate strategy might actually succeed against overwhelming odds. The extraction itself, however, encountered catastrophic complications. Upon reaching Doug, they discovered his injuries were far more severe than external observation had indicated. Internal trauma had progressed to critical levels, rendering him unable to assist in his own evacuation and requiring immediate medical intervention beyond field treatment capabilities. More disastrously, their presence triggered previously undetected security measures around the high-value prisoner, alerting the entire enemy force to their position before they could complete the extraction. What followed was a desperate fighting retreat, with Lyra demonstrating combat capabilities far beyond her previous displays, while Elias struggled to transport Doug's barely conscious form toward their planned extraction route. The overwhelming force converging on their position made survival mathematically impossible despite their extraordinary efforts. As they reached a defensible position that nonetheless represented their final stand, Doug regained momentary lucidity. "Get the data to Echo 7, he commanded, his voice barely audible but carrying absolute authority. "The facility is what matters, not individual survival. Complete the mission." When Elias hesitated, torn between duty and loyalty, Doug continued with unexpected strength. Their objective is recovering the survey data, not eliminating personnel. I can create an opportunity for your withdrawal if you're not burdened with me. The implication was clear and horrifying. Doug intended to ensure his capture would appear to be the primary target, convincing the enemy that he possessed the critical intelligence they sought. This deception would potentially create an extraction window for the others, but would guarantee his own subjection to intensified interrogation methods that would inevitably prove fatal given his current condition. It was a final sacrifice from a man who had already given everything for their collective survival. No acceptable alternatives exist, he stated with the same calm certainty that had guided them through countless crises over the years. The mission parameters were established at initiation. Echo 7 represents potential salvation for hundreds, possibly thousands. 3 lives against those numbers is simple mathematics. His gaze held Elias's with unexpected gentleness despite the harsh reality of his words. You know I'm right. You would make the same choice in my position. The truth of this assessment was undeniable despite its emotional devastation. With profound reluctance, Elias and Lyra prepared for separate withdrawal vectors to divide pursuit forces. In their final moments together, Doug pressed something into Elias's hand. A small data storage device containing his personal logs and tactical analyses accumulated over years of careful observation. Make sure she knows who I was, he requested, his thoughts clearly with Kira despite their desperate circumstances. Not just what I did at the end, but who I was throughout. She deserves to understand the world she's inheriting. Their separation was executed with precision, despite overwhelming emotion. Doug initiated a dramatic offensive action that drew enemy forces toward his position, creating the extraction window he had promised. Elias and Lyra utilized this opportunity with ruthless efficiency, despite their reluctance, knowing that hesitation would render Doug's final sacrifice meaningless. Their separate escape routes eventually reconverged near the approach to Echo 7, where they encountered the extraction team Kalen had dispatched upon losing communication contact. The return to Echo 7 brought not triumph, but somber completion. The facility's activation continued with methodical precision, despite the emotional weight pressing upon all participants. Elias integrated Doug's final data contribution into their developing operational framework, ensuring his strategic insights would continue protecting them despite his absence. Kalen established communication protocols with the main ARC community, arranging for the arrival of additional personnel to fully utilize Echo 7's potential as a regional cornerstone for rebuilding efforts. In the weeks that followed, as Echo 7 transformed from abandoned facility to functioning community center, Elias fulfilled his promise to Doug through evening sessions with Kira. Together, they reviewed the personal logs and memories stored in his final gift, building a complete understanding of the complex man whose sacrifice had secured their future. The child absorbed these lessons with characteristic seriousness, integrating Doug's philosophy and tactical approach into her developing worldview. One evening, as they reviewed a particularly detailed analysis Doug had created regarding sustainable defense strategies, Kira looked up from the display with her obsidian eyes reflecting unusual emotion. He knew from the beginning, didn't he? From the moment you found me, he was already calculating how to ensure the mission's success regardless of personal cost. Elias considered her observation with the honesty Doug would have expected. Yes, he confirmed quietly. That was fundamental to who he was, seeing not just immediate circumstances, but potential futures branching from each decision point. He recognized your test for what it was immediately, but participated in the evaluation process while conducting his own assessment of all participants. The child nodded with understanding beyond her years. That's why he gave me the doll so early, establishing connection while preparing contingencies. He was playing a longer game than anyone realized. Her expression reflected dawning comprehension of Doug's complex motivations. He wasn't just protecting me because I was vulnerable. He was investing in potential, preparing me to contribute to the community he knew would eventually form. This insight revealed the profound strategic depth that had characterized Doug's approach to their entire ordeal. Not merely tactical responses to immediate threats, but comprehensive preparation for multiple potential futures. His apparent evolution from suspicious survivor to protective guardian had been genuine but simultaneously calculated, recognizing that emotional connections and community building represented essential components of long-term survival rather than vulnerability as he had initially presented. As Echo 7 continued developing into the community foundation Doug had envisioned, his influence remained present in every security protocol, resource allocation decision, and strategic assessment. The facility became not simply a survival outpost, but the nucleus of genuine rebuilding, a place where Kira and others like her might experience a childhood not dominated by constant threat, where trust could be established through cooperation rather than manipulation, where humanity's better nature might gradually overcome the brutal pragmatism forced upon them by the collapse. In the command center that served as both operational headquarters and memorial to their lost comrade, Elias often found Kira studying Doug's tactical simulations with the same disciplined focus he had demonstrated. The child who had been sent as a test had become something far more significant, a bridge between generations, carrying forward the knowledge and values that would shape their community's development. Her obsidian eyes reflected not just intelligence, but growing wisdom as she integrated Doug's strategic thinking with her own unique perspective. He would be satisfied with the outcome, she observed during one such session, gesturing toward the expanding facility schematics that showed Echo 7's evolution. The objective was achieved despite complications. The mission parameters were fulfilled. Elias considered her assessment, recognizing the distinctive linguistic patterns she had absorbed from Doug's recorded briefings. The tactical objectives, yes, he acknowledged, but I believe his personal satisfaction would come from seeing you develop into the person you're becoming. Someone who understands both strategy and compassion, both sacrifice and preservation. In the secure communications room adjacent to the command center, where they monitored regional transmissions for potential threats, an unexpected signal appeared on the emergency frequency Doug had established. The pattern matched no known allied or hostile protocol, yet contained embedded authentication markers that triggered immediate recognition in their security systems. The transmission was brief, containing only coordinates and a simple message: containment breach, asset secured, extraction required. As Elias and Kalen analyzed the unexpected communication, verifying its authenticity through multiple validation methods, Kira's expression transformed with sudden comprehension. "He's alive," she stated with absolute certainty that transcended their cautious analysis. The contingency protocols, the automated systems he established, they weren't just for data transmission. They were his personal extraction framework. The implications stunned even the tactically disciplined Kalen. That would require preparations beyond anything we observed, embedded resources, pre-positioned assets, contingency planning at a level that... Her voice trailed off as she recognized the consistency with everything they had learned about their lost comrade. He would have established fallback protocols from the moment we arrived at the original station, multiple layers of contingency regardless of outcome. The coordinates indicated a position beyond the operational range of their current resources, a deliberate choice that would necessitate commitment of significant assets for extraction. The tactical calculation was complex, balancing the potential recovery of an invaluable team member against the risk of exposing Echo 7's developing capabilities to potential hostiles. In the debating silence, Kira approached the command console with determined purpose. Doug would calculate the strategic value of his recovery against potential compromise of our position, she stated, accessing the tactical simulation systems with practiced efficiency. He would run probability matrices, factoring known enemy capabilities, available resources, and potential long-term outcomes. Her small fingers manipulated the controls with precision, implementing analytical frameworks directly adapted from his recorded methodologies. The resulting assessment appeared on the main display, comprehensive, dispassionate, and reflecting Doug's distinctive approach to strategic evaluation. The conclusion was clear despite the complexities involved. Recovery represented acceptable risk given potential intelligence benefits and personnel recovery value, provided specific operational parameters were maintained throughout the extraction process. As they developed the extraction plan using Doug's own tactical frameworks, Elias recognized the profound symmetry of the situation. The man who had sacrificed himself to ensure their survival was now being rescued through the systems he had created, his recovery justified by the strategic assessment methods he had established. It represented perfect closure to their transformative journey. The testing of Kira had led to the testing of all of them, which had ultimately revealed not just individual capabilities, but their collective potential as architects of a new beginning. The mission that would eventually recover Doug from his improbable survival was already being designated Operation Echo, in recognition of both the facility he had helped secure and the reverberating impact of his actions throughout their shared ordeal. For Elias, watching Kira apply her Guardian's methods with such natural precision, the designation carried additional significance. An echo of humanity's better nature, surviving even through the harshest testing of its limits, preserving the compassion, sacrifice, and strategic vision necessary to rebuild, rather than merely survive. In the command center of Echo 7, surrounded by the community that was growing from their collective sacrifices, they prepared to recover the man who had offered so much for their future. The lost had become found, the tester had become tested, and through this crucible of challenge and response, they had all been transformed into something stronger than their individual components. A foundation for rebuilding that honored both pragmatic necessity and fundamental humanity. It was, Elias reflected, as they initiated the extraction sequence, exactly what Doug would have calculated as the optimal outcome from that first moment when a small child's tapping had echoed through the ruins of their broken world.